Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Ashes in the Past. Today, we'll journey into another forgotten chapter of history, a story buried beneath time, waiting to be uncovered. So, let's begin. History remembers countless kings, powerful emperors, brilliant generals. But only one man built the largest contiguous land empire the world has ever known. His name was Genghis Khan. At its greatest extent, his empire stretched from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe, covering millions of square miles across Asia and beyond. Entire kingdoms fell before his armies, and civilizations that had stood for centuries were forced to confront a new power rising from the Mongolian steppe. His cavalry moved with astonishing speed. His generals outmaneuvered enemies that often outnumbered them. And his name became so feared that some cities surrendered before the Mongol army even appeared on the horizon. To many, Genghis Khan was history's greatest conqueror. To others, he was one of its most destructive figures. Even today, his legacy remains deeply debated. But perhaps the most extraordinary part of his story is not the empire he built. It is where he began. He was not born into a mighty kingdom. He inherited no vast army. He possessed no great fortune. As a young boy, he watched his father die. His family was abandoned. They struggled simply to find enough food to survive on the unforgiving grasslands of Mongolia. Nothing about his childhood suggested he would one day reshape the known world. So how did an orphan, living on one of the harshest landscapes on Earth, rise to command an empire unlike any before it? To answer that, we must journey to the windswept Mongolian steppe, where a boy named Temüjin learned that survival itself was the first battle he would have to win. Around the year 1162, a boy named Temüjin was born on the vast Mongolian steppe. It was a land of endless grasslands, bitter winters, and constant uncertainty. Life here was unforgiving. Families survived by herding animals, moving with the seasons, and defending themselves against rival tribes. Strength, loyalty, and courage were not admired qualities. They were necessities. Temüjin's father, Yasugei, was a respected tribal leader who hoped his son would one day inherit his position. But those hopes were shattered when Temüjin was still a child. While returning from arranging his son's future marriage, Yasugei was poisoned by members of a rival tribe. His death changed everything. Without their leader, Temüjin's family was abandoned by their own clan. Left alone on the open steppe, they struggled to survive, living on wild plants, roots, fish, and whatever game they could catch. Hunger became a constant companion. Danger surrounded them. Even within the family, desperation created conflict. In one of the most dramatic episodes of his youth, Temüjin killed his older half-brother Bektar during a dispute over food and authority, an event that revealed the brutal realities of survival on the steppe. Then his hardships grew even worse. Temüjin was captured by a rival tribe and forced into captivity. For many young boys, that would have been the end of the story. For Temüjin, it was only the beginning, because one daring escape would set him on the path toward becoming the most powerful man the steppe had ever known. Temüjin refused to accept the life that fate had given him. After escaping captivity with the help of people willing to risk their own lives, he returned to the steppe with almost nothing. No army, no kingdom, no powerful tribe behind him. But he possessed something far more valuable: the ability to earn loyalty. Instead of rewarding people because of their noble birth, Temüjin chose followers based on courage, skill, and trust. It was a revolutionary idea in a world where family ties usually mattered more than ability. Slowly, his reputation grew. Warriors joined him. Former enemies became allies. Small victories turned into larger ones. Along the way, Temüjin formed an alliance with Togrul, the powerful ruler of the Karate tribe, and renewed his friendship with Jamuka, a childhood companion who had once sworn brotherhood with him. But ambition has a way of changing friendships. As Temüjin's influence expanded, his relationship with Jamuka collapsed. The two men, once bound by loyalty, became bitter rivals, each believing he was destined to lead the Mongol tribes. The struggle that followed was about more than power. It was about the future of the steppe itself. Would Mongolia remain divided among countless rival clans? Or could one leader unite them all? Temüjin believed he already knew the answer. Now he had to prove it. And the battles ahead would give him a new name. One that history would never forget. 4 generations, the Mongolian steppe had been divided. Tribe fought against tribe. Alliances formed. Then collapsed. Revenge passed from one generation to the next, making lasting peace almost impossible. Temüjin intended to change that. Over the years, he defeated rival leaders one by one, including his former blood brother, Jamuka. Some tribes joined him willingly. Others resisted until they had no choice. But victory alone was not enough. Temüjin understood that conquering the steppe meant creating a new kind of nation. He broke the power of the old tribal aristocracy, promoted talented warriors regardless of their family background, and reorganized his followers into military units based on loyalty rather than clan ties. It was a radical transformation that united people who had spent generations fighting one another. Then, in 1206, the tribal leaders gathered at a great assembly known as a Kurultai. There, Temüjin received a new title, Genghis Khan. Although historians continue to debate the exact meaning of the name, it is often understood to signify a universal or oceanic ruler. From that moment, he was no longer simply the leader of a single tribe. He was the ruler of a united Mongol nation. For the first time in history, the peoples of the steppe stood together under one leader. Most rulers would have been satisfied. Genghis Khan was just getting started. Beyond the grasslands lay powerful kingdoms, wealthy cities, and empires that believed the Mongols were little more than scattered nomads. They were about to discover how wrong they were. With the Mongol tribes finally united, Genghis Khan turned his attention beyond the steppe. His first targets were the neighboring kingdoms that had long threatened or underestimated the Mongols. The campaigns began with the western Xia kingdom. Then came the powerful Jin dynasty of northern China, whose fortified cities and vast armies seemed impossible for a nomadic cavalry to defeat. Yet Genghis Khan refused to fight wars the way his enemies expected. His armies moved with astonishing speed. Every warrior rode several horses, allowing the Mongols to travel incredible distances without exhausting their mounts. Scouts gathered intelligence long before the main army arrived, while commanders coordinated attacks across hundreds of miles with remarkable precision. When direct assaults failed, the Mongols adapted. They learned siege warfare from captured engineers, built powerful siege engines, and turned the strengths of their enemies into weapons of their own. City after city fell. Kingdom after kingdom collapsed. Word spread quickly across Asia. The Mongols were no longer simply raiders from the steppe. They had become one of the most disciplined and effective military forces the world had ever seen. But Genghis Khan's greatest challenge still lay ahead. Far to the west stood the Khwarezmian Empire, one of the richest and most powerful states of the medieval world. A single diplomatic incident would soon trigger a war that would change the map of Eurasia forever. The war with the Khwarezmian Empire did not begin with a battle. It began with a diplomatic mission. Genghis Khan sent a caravan of merchants, followed by ambassadors, hoping to establish peaceful trade with the empire. Instead, the governor of Otrar accused the merchants of spying, seized their goods, and ordered their execution. When Genghis Khan demanded justice, the Khwarezmian ruler refused, and one of the Mongol ambassadors was reportedly executed. For Genghis Khan, this was more than an insult. It was an unforgivable betrayal. In 1219, the Mongol armies invaded. What followed stunned the medieval world. Instead of advancing along a single route, Genghis Khan divided his forces into multiple armies that struck from unexpected directions. His commanders crossed deserts that enemies believed were impassable, surrounded cities before defenders realized they were in danger, and coordinated attacks with extraordinary speed. The Mongols relied on discipline as much as courage. Every soldier knew his role. Communication was rapid. Retreats were sometimes used to lure enemies into carefully planned ambushes. Psychological warfare became another powerful weapon. Cities that resisted often faced devastating consequences, while those that surrendered peacefully were frequently spared. Within just a few years, one of the greatest empires in Central Asia had collapsed. The victory demonstrated that Genghis Khan's greatest strength was not simply his cavalry. It was his ability to adapt, outthink, and outmaneuver every opponent he faced. Now the Mongol Empire stretched farther than ever before. Yet Genghis Khan believed the conquest was far from complete. His armies would continue advancing across Asia, leaving behind an empire unlike anything the world had ever seen. With the fall of the Khwarezmian Empire, the Mongols stood at the center of a vast and rapidly expanding realm. Their armies pushed into Central Asia, the Caucasus, and the edges of Eastern Europe, defeating forces that many believed were unbeatable. Kingdom after kingdom fell before commanders who combined speed, discipline, and careful planning with relentless determination. But conquering land was only half the challenge. Holding it was something else entirely. Genghis Khan understood that an empire could not survive through fear alone. He established a legal code, often referred to as the Yasa, though historians continue to debate its exact contents. He promoted capable leaders regardless of their background, protected merchants traveling across his territory, and built an efficient relay network that allowed messages to travel across the empire with remarkable speed. Trade flourished. The Silk Road became safer than it had been in generations, allowing merchants, scholars, and travelers to move between East and West with greater security. Ideas, technologies, religions, and goods crossed continents, connecting civilizations on an unprecedented scale. The Mongol Empire was no longer simply a military power. It had become a bridge between worlds. Yet even the greatest conquerors cannot escape time. In 1227, while leading another campaign against the Western Xia, Genghis Khan died under circumstances that remain uncertain. The exact cause of his death has never been conclusively established. The man who had united the steppe was gone, but his empire was not. His successors would continue expanding it until it became the largest contiguous land empire in human history. The conqueror had died. Now history would decide how he would be remembered. In the summer of 1227, Genghis Khan was leading his final campaign against the Western Xia kingdom. Even in his 60s, he remained at the front of his armies, determined to complete one last conquest. Then, he died. Exactly how it happened remains one of history's enduring mysteries. Some chronicles suggest he fell from a horse during a hunt. Others claim he died from illness brought on by the hardships of campaign life. Later legends tell far more dramatic stories, but there is little reliable evidence to support them. Whatever the cause, one fact is clear. His death was kept secret. The Mongol leadership feared that news of the Great Khan's passing could weaken morale and encourage enemies to resist. According to many historical accounts, the campaign continued until victory was secured before his death became public knowledge. Genghis Khan's final resting place remains unknown. Tradition holds that he wished to be buried in secret somewhere within the Mongolian steppe. Despite centuries of searching, archaeologists have never conclusively identified his tomb. Even in death, the man who changed Eurasia left behind one final mystery. But the greatest surprise came after his passing. Most empires collapse when their founder dies. The Mongol Empire did the opposite. Under his sons and grandsons, it expanded even farther, stretching from the shores of the Pacific to the plains of Eastern Europe and the Middle East. Genghis Khan's life had ended. His greatest impact on history was only beginning. Few figures in history have inspired opinions as divided as Genghis Khan. To many societies that faced the Mongol invasions, he was remembered as a ruthless conqueror whose campaigns brought destruction on an unimaginable scale. Entire cities were destroyed, and countless lives were lost as the Mongol armies expanded across Asia and Europe. That part of his legacy cannot be ignored. But it is not the whole story. Once the wars ended, the Mongol Empire created one of the largest zones of relative stability the world had ever seen. Merchants traveled more safely across Eurasia, the Silk Road flourished, and ideas, technologies, and cultures moved between East and West faster than ever before. The Mongols protected trade routes, encouraged religious tolerance throughout much of the empire, promoted people based on ability rather than noble birth, and built an efficient communication network that connected lands separated by thousands of miles. Their influence reached far beyond the battlefield. Paper, printing, gunpowder, and other innovations spread more rapidly across continents. Diplomats, scholars, and travelers, including Marco Polo, journeyed through territories that had once been divided by constant warfare. Genghis Khan's empire eventually broke into separate khanates. Like every empire before it, it slowly declined. But its influence endured. Even today, historians continue to debate whether Genghis Khan should be remembered primarily as a destroyer, or as one of history's greatest empire builders. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between the two, and that complexity is what makes his story so remarkable. More than 8 centuries have passed since Genghis Khan rode across the Mongolian steppe. The empire he built has long since disappeared. Its borders have vanished. Its armies are gone. Yet his influence remains. He united tribes that had spent generations fighting one another. He created the largest contiguous land empire in human history. He transformed warfare through speed, discipline, intelligence, and adaptability. And he connected civilizations across Eurasia on a scale the world had never experienced before. His legacy is impossible to describe with a single word. He was a conqueror, a lawgiver, a strategist, an empire builder, and for millions who lived in the path of his armies, a symbol of unimaginable destruction. History has never reached a unanimous verdict on Genghis Khan. Perhaps it never will. But no serious study of world history can ignore him. The rise of the Mongol Empire reshaped trade, diplomacy, communication, and cultural exchange across continents. Its effects reached far beyond the battlefield, influencing the course of civilizations for centuries. Genghis Khan's story reminds us that great leaders often leave behind complicated legacies. They inspire admiration. They provoke criticism. And they force every generation to ask difficult questions about power, conquest, and the cost of changing the world. Because empires eventually fall. Cities are rebuilt. Borders are redrawn. But the actions of one determined individual can echo across history long after the sound of galloping horses has faded into silence.